Now we've all been there. You've worked hard, you've slaved over a brew, you've nurtured it, fermented it, finally you've packaged it, and it's ready to drink. You pour a glass or you open the bottle and you look for that beautiful hop aroma, and there's nothing. What went wrong? Well, today I'm going to go through 3 mistakes that is ruining your beer right now. If you want to know how to keep hoppy goodness locked into your beer for longer, stay tuned. So oxidation has got to be the #1 enemy of hoppy goodness for the home brewer. But what is oxidation? Well, I think the easiest way to think about it, take away all the chemical formulas and all that, is to cut open an apple or an avocado and just leave it on the bench for a while. You'll notice over time it goes orange, yellow, brown, even black in the case of the avocado. What's going on there? What's happening there is oxidation. Oxygen is getting in there and it's reacting with the chemicals on the surface of the avocado or the apple, and it's changing the chemical nature, and we see that through discoloration. Now the same thing happens with beer. When it gets oxidized, we can notice a distinct change in color, and as the beer gets older and older, that color gets darker and darker, more browny, murky sort of color. So that brings me to our #1 tip. What can we do to try and prevent this oxidation happening? So my first tip is to use tannic acid in your brew, something like Brew B, or my homebrew shop sells this equivalent, which is tannic acid. Why would you want to put that in your beer? Well, what it does is it binds to things like iron and copper in your wort and drops it out of solution. What does that mean? Well, those particular metals can be cofactors in the oxidation reaction. If we take them out of solution and we take them out of the wort before you put it into the fermenter, it means there's less of those things to carry out that oxidation reaction, which means you get less oxidation in your finished beer. So that's my #1, my first tip for avoiding oxidation in your brew. Consider adding something like Brew B, a tannic acid product that will chelate with those metal ions, drop them out of solution, leaving them in the bottom of your kettle so that they don't make it into your fermenter and ruin your finished beer. So now we've talked about the harmful effects of oxidization. It's important not to confuse oxidation or oxidization with oxygenation. So let's say we've brewed our beer, we've added our Brew B, we've transferred it to the kettle. Now, we don't need to freak out about oxygenation of the wort at this stage. In fact, brewers actually recommend oxygenating the wort to help the yeast grow and ferment. Yeast love oxygen just like we do. They need to breathe. And so brewers often need to add some oxygen to their wort so that the yeast can get a good, healthy start to fermentation. So don't stress out about oxygen at this stage. Sending that wort into your fermenter, you can splash, you can oxygenate the wort all you like. In fact, that's encouraged at this point. So once we've pitched our yeast, we need to start thinking a little bit more about oxygen ingress into our brew and be really stingy with the ways that oxygen can get in there. Because once the yeast has done its job, any remaining oxygen is going to remain in the wort. And then what happens? Well, it'll destroy your brew. It'll kill your hop flavor and aroma. And you don't want that. So the next big chance for oxygen ingress after we've pitched our yeast, we've put the lid back on the fermenter, it's bubbling away and it's producing CO2, carbon dioxide, which is great because that'll help bring more oxygen out of solution as well. The next problem though is you're going to want to do a dry hop. So how do you do that without getting oxygen into the fermenter? Well, you want to be as quick, as efficient, as gentle as possible so that you don't stir up, so you don't introduce more oxygen than necessary. Often at high Krausen is a good time to do this. That's when the yeast is bubbling away and it's most active. So when you add your dry hop there, plenty of carbon dioxide is being produced and the yeast is still working hard, it's still consuming oxygen. So that's often a good time if you want to take advantage of biotransformation also, assuming your yeast does that. That's also a good time to do your dry hop. Now, a lot of other brewers will want to do things like I've seen a lot of fancy ideas in homebrew, like attaching bags with hops to the inside of the fermenter to drop it at high Krausen and so that you don't have to open the fermenter again, or these hop bongs like one I'm using here. And I think they're great ideas. Anything help you can get to try and minimize the oxygen in your brew. And actually it is important because as home brewers, because we're working with much smaller batches, our batches are much more sensitive than the professional brewers are. They're working with much bigger batches, so a little bit of dissolved oxygen goes a lot further in our brew than it does in a big, massive professional batch. So we need to be really careful and think about how we can minimize oxygen ingress. It doesn't mean you have to buy a fancy new fermenter or do all these things, but it is something worth thinking about. How are you going to minimize the oxygen you get into your wort while dry hopping? Let me know in the comments below. Now, the next stage that we're often going to introduce oxygen as home brewers in our process is during the packaging process. Whether you're bottling or kegging, you've got to think about this. So if you want to know how to minimize oxygen ingress in your home brew during packaging, which is most important to getting a hoppy, fresh beer, then click on this video and I'll see you there.